Awesome. We're live. Thank you so much, Carlos, for joining me.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. It's Sunday at 11 a.m. here in Toronto.
Yes.
My name is Tharmila Rajasingam. For those of you that don't know, thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about our first property, our experiences buying of our first home. And I really want to touch upon just walking you through the first time home buyer experience. And the reason why we wanted to do this is because when Carlos and I sat down and we were talking about our own clients and some of our own experiences, we realized that there were so much challenges and learning that came with it that we needed to have this dialogue online and public so that people can see that it doesn't matter when you buy it, we all have a chance of getting into home ownership. And really, the philosophy and the process doesn't really change, even though the prices may have and the way you may do your offers might have, and some of the conditions you might put in. But essentially, the philosophy around it and your approach is very much the same, from
Yes.
everything from aligning with the right people to having the right mindset. So Carlos, I really love that when we talked about this, you were like, okay, I wanted to really talk about like where was our headspace at when we
Right.
were buying our first property.
Yeah.
So when,
Yeah.
so tell me a little bit more about, yeah, maybe introduce yourself and then we'll jump into some of your thought
Okay.
process.
Sounds good. Hey everyone. Good morning. Welcome. So today we're going to be talking about the first time home buyer process, our experience, our challenges, just so that you can also know that it's something normal, right?
Mhm.
Like you'll always go through these challenges, maybe even doubts. So having like the right people around you to be able to support you, to give you answers, that I find that is extremely important. So again, I am a real estate agent here. I'm based out of Toronto. And I believe personally, and with Tharmila, that knowledge is power. The more you know, then the easier it is to make these decisions. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. How to the first time homebuyer process, which is scary, but
Yeah.
at the same time, one thing that I remember you told me, Tharmila, when something is scary and exciting, that's when you really just need to go for it. That's when it's meant for you. It's meant to be yours. So yeah. So sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, no, like where was your headspace at when you had to buy your first home, and even just the opportunity? Did you know it was the right time? Like, how did you know all of that?
Yeah. So it was actually very interesting because I've always wanted to own a property, right? It's always like that want, something you want, and you think about it. You're constantly thinking about it. Do I want it? But then there was, at that time, there was like news that you would look at and it'd be like, oh my gosh, like things are getting expensive or it's hard or you need this much. Like I was paying a lot of attention to what people were saying without actually doing the research. So
Mm.
for me, I was noticing that I was building a lot of like, just like a fearful mentality where it's like, I don't know, like even what questions to ask, where to get started, right? And I think I was like even just getting the incorrect information. And that at some point made me think it's like, I really need to speak to someone, right? Someone that knows, someone that is experienced, someone that has gone through this process, right? Because if I'm building all these ideas for myself, I don't know what's true or what's not, right? So I think like I was just pretty much confused. I was confused. I knew that I wanted to get into the market, but I never knew when was the right time.
Yeah, me too. I was much
Right?
younger, one, and plus I was living alone at the time, and
Yeah.
for me was I was going from places to places renting, and for me I needed to get out of that. I wanted to own, I wanted to have more control, and I never wanted to give my way of life to a landlord, and that things can change in a moment and someone can come to me and say you need to move in a couple of months. And I
Right.
wanted and I was just going from places to places, and I always, and for those people that know my background and of me, being away from home for so long, I felt a bit lost, and I wanted to have a bit, and home for me felt vulnerable, and I wanted somewhere to come home to, and make it mine, so that I don't have to
Yeah.
move and change every 6 months. And once I know I wanted to move and buy a property. But you're so right, like the fear, like scarcity mindset, I think I really
Yeah.
struggled with that, because I knew that I wanted all the abundance in the world, right? You want all the
Yeah.
good things in the world, but I felt like I'm never going to be good enough for something, because again, I had all these false assumptions. Every time I
Right.
would go to the wrong people. So do not go to the people that don't know this.
Yeah.
Go to people who are licensed realtors, licensed mortgage people, if you want to ask about financing, because I was going to people that own properties, but they were the same age as me, or who just bought them. They had no idea what it's like to buy a property, and I would go to them and be like, so what's your payments like? Can you afford the
Yeah.
property?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
whoa, no, no, no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was going to the wrong places trying to find the right answers. And no,
And that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, sometimes like you go around way too much, right? And sometimes you don't touch the right people,
correct.
right? And I think with one thing with that too, Tharmila, is that when I first started thinking about it, based on that, I already started kind of like psyching myself out and saying, wait, maybe I can't afford it, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I mean, I thought I had good credit, right? I thought I had maybe a down payment. But at the same time, it's like, wait a second. In order for me to actually like know if I'm somewhat close to there, I have to take that step, right? Like I have to take that action, and even if you're not ready right now, right? Maybe we weren't ready, right? Maybe we had to wait 6 months, a year, 2 years to get to be ready. But it's at least that knowing that there's something to work towards, right?
Yeah.
And I think,
And or sometimes some people are ready, or they think that, oh, I don't have enough money, I'll never be able to
right,
afford. And then they
right,
realize that you actually didn't have conversation with family members that could co-sign for a little bit for you,
yes,
or
yes,
talk to a mortgage agent and look at your options. Maybe there's financing available elsewhere. And I
right,
think, and there's really creative ways for you to do it. And for me, like Josh and I, we were at our full-time jobs, and Josh was actually in school. He had multiple part-time jobs. For people
yeah,
that know us, we had like 3 to 5 jobs at one point. And that's how we were able to buy our property at a young age, right? Both purchased our first property at 23, and we were able to do
wow,
that. And, yeah, and a lot of our friends, nobody had properties at the time, and we were able to do that because we would work, and people would always ask, how come you guys are always working like weekends and weeknights? And we're like,
yeah,
because we have goals and we wanted to reach them, and I know that we can't do that without having to have these finances, and I'm not going to depend on anyone
right,
in my family because I
right,
didn't have a really good relationship with them. So if
right,
you know those circumstances, take advantage of that. So if you have family members that are supportive, go talk to them. If you feel like you're not in the right financial situations right now that you can be prepared for in the future, then go speak to a licensed, qualified, a mortgage broker that can look at your various options and tell you and kind of
right,
get you ready for home ownership. Again, I love that you said that. It might not be tomorrow, it might not be 6 months, but a year. But that's why a lot of you won't believe it. Some of our clients, I helped purchase property for somebody who's been wanting to buy it for months,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
people don't call you, and people do. Don't get me wrong. There are
yeah,
times people called and said, "Hey, I need you to list my property." And then there's very occasions where I've had people that call and said, I'm not sure if I could buy a property. Can I, and they ask you questions. So make sure that if you're looking into buying your first property, just if that's in your, in your, your goals, think
yeah,
of start planning for them now. You don't know when
right,
you'll get
yeah,
there, but
for
make sure
sure,
you are doing the research. I love that you said knowledge is power, because just
yeah,
talk to a lot of qualified people, talk to multiple realtors, talk to multiple
right,
mortgage brokers, get multiple different, and maybe you might now want to live in downtown Toronto, but you
right,
may need to move to maybe Oshawa or maybe to Bowmanville, and
yeah,
that's okay. Maybe you might like it, but have you
yes,
been there before? Maybe you
right.
may need to, and maybe you need to do a little bit of research there.
And that's exactly it, right? Like, I mean, not figure it out, but like also maintain like, just like that motivation for it. Just because you go to like your mortgage agent, your mortgage broker, and they tell you, hey, you know what? Right now you don't qualify, or you're thinking, hey, I want like a big house, I want a property, 800,000, right? Prices are rising, prices are going crazy, but then you qualify only for like let's say 500,000. That's not a reason for you to say, oh, I'm not going to do it then, right?
Totally.
It's like maintaining yourself in that mindset for you to keep on going, right? And if again, more like like how you said, there's different creative ways to be able to get home ownership, right? Like there's a lot of professionals. There's people that do know like the ins and outs of the market, right? They know numbers,
Yeah,
so it's someone will tell you yes,
absolutely.
right?
And for those of you that are going to be watching this, who are again thinking of getting into the market and home ownership, and you have a lot of questions about, who do I talk to? Do you have any access to a mortgage agent? What are the type of questions I should be asking them? Get in
Yeah.
touch with us. And if there's any
Hmm.
questions that you may have that before you even get to that phase, you're just struggling with even the type of questions to ask,
Right.
get in touch with us, because Carlos and I want to do this in a more of a process way. We want to give you more media information, but let us know so that I will love to help give that right information to you in the best way possible.
Right.
And and I don't want you to ever, if that's again, if this is in your dreams, in your wheelhouse, and let's just sit together, have an initial conversation. And if there's any other questions, throw it in the comment section below. And we'd like to, even if you don't address it now, Carlos and I are going to be planning some more future lives together. This is really just a promo to kind of get the conversation moving. This is why today we don't have a sexual conversation, because we really want to talk about it from our own perspective to let you know that home ownership is possible. It is how you structure everything from your mindset to your offers to making sure you have all your ducks lined up. And it's just like playing a game, right? If you're going to play a certain game, you're going to go play hockey, make sure you have all the right equipments, right? You know how to save. You've done, you know, when you're working with the right team so that you can score. Like they're protecting, so you're not playing alone, right? It's very similar home ownership. I wanted to talk to you about in terms of when you're searching for your property. Like, I know you said you had pre-construction. So what was that process like for you? And I know it was a long time ago. So, but I wanted to just understand what your headspace was at.
Yeah, no, and for me it was very different because there was a few properties that I was looking at pre-construction, and again, I think it was like 6 years ago almost, where I was looking at different properties, and there was one that I really did like. But then, like how I said, right, like I went, I saw it, and I saw that I couldn't afford it, you know, and was I disappointed? Very much so. I was disappointed. You know, I was upset because I did want to get home ownership. And I couldn't enter the market. So then I think it took maybe like 6-7 months later where I saw another project that was coming up. And I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm going to, like, I didn't want to, but I think like how you said, you have the right people that encourage you to do that as well. So I got encouraged to go look. It was a pre-construction. And I'm like, I think I'm going to go for it. I'm going to try it again. I went, I got the paperwork ready. So in this, the only thing with this was different that I didn't work with a realtor. I worked with all the builders, right? So directly with them, payments and whatnot scheduled. So that itself was a little bit scarier. But at the same time, Tharmila, it's like I said, like I had that goal. And until I didn't really take the step to go look and make sure that, okay, I have the mortgage, I know I'm pre-approved for this, I know I have this, I know I have a down payment, right? Like I gathered all the information. And I think with that first condo, the one that I was going to try to go into, I didn't gather the information. I was going based on an assumption that like, oh, I think I have like a down payment. I think I have 5%. I think I have this. I think I have that. And I just went and I did it, thinking all these things. But in reality, like, I didn't know anything until I did. I wasn't being realistic.
Yep.
Right. And I think that's what a lot happens to, like, because of the excitement. We just want to go.
But I don't think you knew, right? Sometimes like you didn't have a realtor that was helping you. The builder was protecting their assets and they're there to help you with the applications if you know how. But at the end of the day, you didn't have someone on your court walking you through the process of and representing you, right? I think there was a big difference there. And
that is different.
Yeah. And like for me, for example, like Josh and I bought a condo, our first property. And when we were going through it, at the time, again, we were a bit of in a seller's market, but we weren't in a hot market that we are now, where things start disappearing within hours and days, right? And although we were looking at it in downtown core, where the properties were more enticing, there were less days on market, but we had flexibility around looking at more variety of properties. So I had a chance to look at variety of buildings, variety of layouts. We had time to think about it. But I also, that didn't mean that I had all these buyer's remorse that came to me. The moment that our realtor called us and told us that it's about to go sold firm, we were like, what do you mean sold firm? Like we can still pull out, you know? Like when can we? It's the closing. Like do we get the keys that day? Like I love that you touched upon realistic, because in order for me to be realistic on something, I need to know the environment. You know, I need to know what home ownership is. People have no clue. There's so many first-time home buyers. I speak to them. They have no idea. The other day, this is so funny. I was talking to somebody on Instagram, another real estate agent, about this and laughing because I was talking to a client that called us and we couldn't help them. And because they called and said, hey, I need a 2-garage house with a large garage and a laneway for $400,000 in Etobicoke. And I said, sorry, this is not early 2000s, not even. And it was really, they're misguided. And I kid you not, I had a client that called us. This is, like late 2020. And she said, hey, I heard on the news because of the pandemic, a lot of people having to sell their properties and they're in sticky situations. So that housing market, the prices are going down and a lot of properties are going at a discount. And I
Yeah,
said,
yeah,
oh goodness, where? I want to buy a couple.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
what?
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
and it's
yeah, yeah.
interesting because people are sometimes you want to be realistic, but sometimes people are misguided. So this is why it's really
Right.
important you get the right information from the right people. And it's as a homeowner and someone who's looking to buy, whether you're a seller or buyer, and especially when you're a buyer, think of it this way: you make sure you're in control at all times.
Yeah,
You may not know everything, and that's why you want to choose a really good realtor, mortgage agent, a good lawyer that's going to
yeah,
represent you and protect you, even a good inspector. I know it's really hard now, so you might want to do pre-inspection in this market
yeah.
than back in the day where we did do an inspection, you know. And I think that for me was I really wanted to come to a point where I wanted to ask a lot of questions.
Right.
In
Yeah.
order for me to let go of my fears, I needed to ask a lot of questions. So don't think that a question is a bad question. Ask them,
No.
because if you don't, we assume that you already know. And how many times have you spoken to a buyer that you tell them something and they're like, yeah, yeah, and you're like, yeah, as in you get it, or
Right.
yeah, as in
Yeah.
you just want me to keep going. And
For sure.
touch upon that,
For
yeah.
right. Like and that's exactly it. Like people like it's okay. There's no silly questions. Right? Like there's no like because no one. I mean, that's why it's called first time home buyer.
You got it.
Right? It's your first time. So with anything that you're doing new that's different, that's your first time, you should have a lot of questions, even if you've done your research, right? Like you know how like interest rates are, you know how the housing market is, you've done your research of prices and whatnot, so you've done that, you know it. But at the same time, like you getting that, like let's say, solidified answer is a lot better than it's like, well, I think I know all of this, and you're going based on what you think. But it's
You
always good to get that second opinion. That doesn't mean anything, right? It just means that you want to be 100% certain,
you got
right?
it.
And that's good. Like the more you ask, the more you know, the more you
Yeah,
get, the more information.
100%. And hi, John. Thanks for your comment. I'll get in touch with you. I also wanted to say that your first home doesn't have to be your dream home.
Right,
you know
right,
Sometimes when people, that comes to do with being realistic, is that sometimes
right,
don't put expectations on yourself where you're leading yourself to fail. There's a reasons why people go from, there's a reason why people upsize and downsize, right?
right. Yeah,
There's a point in your life you get to where you may need to downsize. There's a point in your life you may get to where you
yeah,
may need to upsize, and your
yeah,
lifestyle will grow. You will grow. What if you get a job somewhere where you may not need to work here in Toronto anymore, where you can go to the outskirts of Toronto? What if you may need to come back to downtown Toronto now that people are returning back to work? So
right.
really
Yeah,
think about your options, in not in today, maybe think about it in a little bit of a long term, but also it doesn't have to be long term as in 5-10 years.
right. Yeah,
You can, there's really creative ways for you to, and I don't want to overwhelm first time home buyers now, but think of the possibility that your property that you buy, your primary resident, can help you refinance for your
right.
multiple,
Yes,
set you up for generational
exactly.
wealth and help you get into real estate investing. And I want people to know that, and I don't want you to, think about it going into it, that there's multiple options for you. You're not,
Yes,
you just, it's really all up to you, is because you decide, how and where and when you want to do this. And
right.
if home ownership is in your lane way at all, I know people that have I had a coworker who had an amazing job. He was a manager too, and
Yeah,
he senior manager, and he had an amazing position. His wife had an amazing position elsewhere at another institution, and they both rented, and
yeah,
in closer to downtown Toronto. They rented a home for a long time, and they're like, no, we like renting, we like going from places to places, and that's just us. We'll never own.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
totally fine, right?
yeah.
I just figure out what your lifestyle is. You just live up to your own dreams and goals, and essentially why we wanted to bring this. And I wanted to kind of go back to some of my own experience too when I was putting in the offer too. Is that I had no idea what that even meant.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
like, what do you mean by an offer? So the seller can reject mine, but why? And
yeah.
but I didn't even know the type of questions to even ask. So,
Right.
for example, if you're a first time home buyer and you feel like you don't even know that type of question you should be asking, that's okay. That's what your real estate agent's for.
Yeah.
Ask them. I don't
Yeah.
even know what I'm doing here. What should I be worried about? And for me was, I'm a planner. All of you know this. My budgets have budgets, my lists have lists. And for me, nothing made more sense to me until I did my own budget of, pre-purchase and after purchase, and putting all the costs that associated with purchasing a home, and even
Yeah.
after possession, what are
Yeah.
all the things that are to come. Sometimes I have clients that would be like, oh, I love this building, and they send it to me, and I'm like, did you know the maintenance was that high? I don't You told me your budget was, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh no, and they're like, did you know that this was inclusive? So again, there's a lot of multifaceted to this.
Yeah.
That's why you don't have to think about it. That's why you have your real estate agent, but
Right.
think about it from pre-purchase to post-purchase as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it, right? Like, I mean, there is like your ultimate goal could be like that big mansion, but there's steps that you have to get to,
Yeah.
right? Especially, I think even like that as a first time home buyer, it's like maybe you have, yeah, like, I mean, that's like the initial step, right? But like you can start off with a bachelor, then get into a 1 bedroom, build your way up. Like
Yeah.
I said, right? Like there's different investment strategies too that are used to be able to get you to that mansion, to be
Okay.
able to get you to that ultimate goal, right? And there's a lot of even assistance out there, right? There's like government assistance.
You got
There's
it.
non-for-profit organizations that help obtain home ownership. There's different type of like living that you're able to, right? Like enter the market. It's like and it's also whatever like makes you feel comfortable, right? Because I think that's one thing too, like reflecting back, that happened to me when I was getting into my first property, is that Tharmila, like you were saying about like lifestyles, like I completely changed and that's one thing that to be like now, like saying, what would we do differently? That's one thing that I would have done differently. I had a certain lifestyle, but then I wanted to get into home ownership.
Mm.
And then I cut that lifestyle like in half, simply because I'm like, my goal is to get into the market.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what that did for me? That made me feel a lot more stressed. It made me build a lot more anxiety. It get me built like really flustered, because now I'm like, wait a second. I'm used to like every paycheck before. I used to be like, oh yeah, let's go out, friends, family, let's spend my paychecks, right? Like with things that maybe weren't important. And then when I got into that goal of like, I want to get home, now like I have to stop doing that, because my life will change at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't be just like spending, especially if I don't have my full down payment.
Yeah.
So for like a full year and a half, like I was honestly, I shifted myself in a point where it's like, now I don't go out as much, right? Like I didn't used to go out as much. I didn't spend because I knew the responsibility that I needed to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and you touched about like, you don't know sometimes the expenses, mortgage payments, right? Closing costs, like your maintenance fees, right? Like there's a lot of things, again, and this is probably fine, like condo, but like even with the home, like with the house, there's like so many other expenses that you would not normally have if you're renting, if you're living at home.
Absolutely. And I really wanted to talk about cost is one thing, right? And another thing is like who you buy a property with as well, right? Yes. Sometimes people get pressured into, I've had people who pressured into be like, oh, I need a co-signer. And they just call anyone and everyone they know. And you realize that they're going to go on title, and make sure that there's another process to removing them off title. So just be careful about that. And I can speak from my own experience of people in my own lives that signed on with people, with partners that were there for only temporarily. That's why even when Josh and I had a very strong relationship, Josh and I have been together for so long, but even when I purchased our first home and Josh and I invested together, we were like, oh my God, should we both go on title together? Should we create a separate agreement? We don't know what our relationship could lead to, but you need to have an open mind about the fact that, what are you assured of? Who is talk about all of that with your lawyer, right? And sometimes that people, I know in this market you're going to be pressured to do things you don't like. For example, I helped buy first-time home buyers for multiple properties without seeing them, and we had multiple offers that were declined leading up to it, and that's just the reality. And but these first-time home buyers, we sat down and explained all the pros and cons, the consequences of doing this, but also, what it's needed to, present an offer that is firm, that is a clean offer, but what is that could do to you, right? Especially if a property that you haven't even seen, it literally sold within hours of hitting the market, but there were other offers that were coming in without people seeing the property. Like nobody booked showings for this property, right? It just hit the hit MLS. So I think that essentially, you having the right, resources, the right knowledge, but in the right mindset to know how far you're willing to go, and understanding if you know your financial situation and you've had a very good conversation with your mortgage broker, then you know what your budget is. Properties are selling for ridiculously over asking. You can, when people come to me and say, hey, my budget is 850, 900, I'm not putting, I'm not sending them properties at 900 because, right? So think about it, and you shouldn't be looking at it. I had buyers sending me, and I have a CRM where I track everything that people are looking at and what properties, so I can tell my clients, hey, nope, you can't afford this property, or here's why you can afford this one instead, and helping them with that search. And I realized that sometimes some of my clients would send me properties that are so closer to their budget. And then I ask them, okay, this is your budget, but you do know you have all these other costs that come with it, right? So I think just do that little bit of research. It'll save you. I love that saying, go slow to go fast. So take a moment to sometimes just slow yourself down and do a little bit of that research, so that when you are ready to put in that offer, you win it the first time around, if not the second time around, but you're able to put in an offer that is enticing enough, that is acceptable in today's market. And I get that today's market is super nutty, and it is very, it's challenging, and it's very stressful and overwhelming for first time home buyers. But this is why you make sure you have a really strong real estate agent, make sure you have people that are, mortgage brokers that are really have access to multiple different, this is one thing I always, suggest, and I, let people know, is that some people are like, oh, I have a contact at the bank, and I'm like, that's great, but the bank only has access to these products.
The products, exactly.
That they have access to. A broker might have access to these products, but then I also had brokers that only had access to these products. So make sure you're talking to different people, so you have access to multiple different options and variety that is suitable for you.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's it, right, too. And it's like, we're here, like, as real estate agents, we're not here to like burst your bubble, right? But we're here to be able to tell you, it's like, what? No, like I said, that's your max budget. Like, why would you do that? Like, how can you go like it's not that we're telling you don't do it, but it's just like, as real estate agents, that's our main goal too, right? To act in your best interest, right? So if you're going to be disappointed, like, we're looking out for you ultimately, right? And this is why it's good to have someone that will just tell you, it's like, no, like, you can't really like go it a little bit lower, or like, let's start looking at lower priced properties and then build, right? If anything, let's build, right? But like, not for straight off the bat, like, and I think that's important, right? Someone that can be honest with you. Someone that's going to tell you can and cannot do it.
Yeah, and for me, I flip it the other way around. For me, is sometimes, instead of thinking, oh, maybe this agent isn't the right for me, but maybe they're actually protecting you and they're representing you in the best way possible. And actually, this is better because they're helping you win your offer every time. If you'll know this, and if you've spoken to me and working with me, and I'll tell you like it is, and it is really is about setting you up for success rather than failure. So
exactly.
You may think, oh, she's not going to help me get that $900,000 home. It's like it's really painting the picture of, yes, but here is how we're going to get there,
Yes, exactly.
What that looks like. And it may not be your way of getting there. And
exactly. You have to trust us. Right? You have to trust that we know what we're doing.
100%.
Right.
And as real estate agents who weren't real estate agents who purchased, when we were buying our first property, one of the biggest things for me now, looking back, some of the things that I've learned is that I wish I'd asked more questions, but I'm glad that I trusted the professionals that were doing their job. And I also, and I think that I'm really glad that I allowed myself to have access, have to be able to allow myself to purchase this property, because I know people that have access to funds, they have access to help, and they're just analysis paralysis. They're so afraid of something, and a lot of things that they're just like, maybe this is not the right time, maybe the market would crash, maybe what if I buy this and then there's a market correction, what if I lose a lot of money, or what if this happens, that happens. And it's just like, whoa, you're in the way of your own, so I wanted to just let people know is that they're natural feelings, acknowledge them,
right?
And how you can combat those feelings is instead of you answering yourself, take those questions to a professional and people
Yes.
that do this and they do it really well.
Right. Yeah, because when you're having like all those, right, like intrusive thoughts, right, like you're basing your opinions based on like your feelings, and sometimes, you know, they're not the greatest, right? Because now you're just over emotional on those thoughts. So even with that, like, yeah, ask the right person or calm your I mean, I don't know how to say, but like calm yourself down, right? And then think about it on a clear mind.
You got it.
You're right. So,
Absolutely.
but yeah.
And when looking back at some of your own learnings, I guess, going through buying your first properties, or any other lessons that you want to share before we end the call for today?
Yeah, just like I would say like the biggest thing, Tharmila, is yeah, looking at your whole financial situation as well,
Mhm.
right? Making sure that you do have a set goal of what it is that you want, what it is that you're going after, right? Like, you know, continue being realistic with it, and just know that if what you want is home ownership, you will get there.
Mhm.
It is possible. It is possible, right? Like anyone can obtain it,
Mhm.
right? But just make sure that you are getting the information, educating yourself, and that's it. And then just let everything else flow, right?
Mhm.
And it will flow. You will get it. It'll be good. But just trust that you will get it. Trust the process.
Absolutely, absolutely, and make sure you have all the right resources to be
Yeah.
financially prepared, and you have the right resources and the right, the right people helping you out, right? And just doing the due diligence. Just cannot stress enough that you asking the right questions is gonna it will save you a lot of money. And I know
Yeah.
that I'm speaking from a very much of an investor mindset, but Josh and I, we think very similar with any property that we purchase, whether it's for personal or for business, right? And I think that
Yeah.
thinking along those lines. But awesome, Carlos, this was a really good conversation. I know
Yes.
we were able to get a little personal and touch up on a
Yes.
lot of little aspects of homeownership, but this is really, folks, just to let you know that Carlos and I want to do this and get into more of a granular conversation. What is it like
Yeah.
to be pre-qualified? What is it like searching for a home in today's market? What is it like to choosing the right real estate agent, to doing the due diligence, and what is that process of being sold conditional to firm like, and closing days like,
Right.
and having the right contact information. So this is just really is a startup conversations to a lot more. And but we
Yes.
wanted to do this more from our own experience and share a little bit of our own story to tell you that whatever you're feeling as a first time home buyer is very real, and it
Yeah.
is normal. And
Yeah.
just to let you know, to acknowledge that.
Yeah. For sure. And that it's possible. Everything is
Absolutely.
possible. Right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, everyone, for
Good.
joining
Thanks,
us.
Tharmila.
Yeah, and if you like this
Yeah.
content, give it a thumbs up. And if you have any questions, make sure to get in touch with us. Carlos and I are both real estate agents in the Greater Toronto
Yes.
area, and we're happy to help you with any of your buying needs. Thank you so much,
For
everyone.
sure.
Have a wonderful
Thanks,
weekend.
everyone. Bye.